The following programme contains descriptions of real-life violence that some viewers may find distressing.
Unless it's happened to you or someone you know, you really, really struggle to take all this in. You're thinking, did that really just happen? Did someone just try and kill me? I've gone from married, dreams coming, everything, in a split second, I'm fighting for my life. This is where you go into a shock. You try and think about someone's mentality to do this to another human being. I think it's monstrous.
He said, there's blood all over the floor, blood all over the bathroom. The logical person would dial 999. The fact that Richard then took another day to phone the police, it beggars belief. When I met Richard Thompson with his huge facial injuries, it was quite clear this case was a runner. But Richard, he had wasted 3 days and allowed the scene to be destroyed. And even when he contacted the police, purely said, I want this logged in case I divorce her. Unbelievable. He was coerced into a hugely controlling relationship, and he didn't see the wood for the trees.
As she walked out the door, she turned back and said, you'll never be able to tell anyone what I did to you. Almost like a warning.
Do you think that she meant that you would be too embarrassed to tell anyone?
There could be that element there. The only thing I find embarrassing, that I was suckered into this. Being suckered into laying on a floor is pretty horrendous. It's trust. That's the only way I got myself into that situation.
We've got this whole issue of the male ego. Richard was embarrassed to admit what he'd been through. But 20 or 30 years ago, the male psyche was one of dominance. We were a very misogynistic society. And so the possibility that a man would be targeted by a woman was alien to most people. And Richard could not accept that the person he'd married would go to such lengths to kill him. He said to me, you can't switch love on and off. And that's the point. The scary thing about Dina, it starts with a love story.
I was like a modern-day globetrotter. Financially wise, I was comfortable. But what I didn't realise is that longer and longer I was working abroad, my social network was just getting smaller and smaller.
What did you do?
Well, in those days, back in the late 90s, there was nothing else but Lonely Heart columns. You had a code in your advert. Then you could dial in and see if anyone left a message.
Were you optimistic?
I'm always optimistic. I thought, oh, yeah, she sounds nice. We'll meet up. She was very bubbly, extrovert. I'm an extrovert, confident, and these are things that I found attractive. Dina said, oh, I'm off to Florida in a couple of months. I go fishing in Florida. Would you like to join me? My hobby all my life has been fishing. I jumped at the chance. The stuff I was catching in the English Channel, they class as bait out there. And that's when Dina put her first hook in me. We stayed in this little place called St. Pete Beach. She knew the layout of the place. She knew restaurants. Even the Americans called it paradise.
We went out, we did a little grouper fishing, a little snapper fishing. She was affectionate towards him, and he was affectionate towards her. It was that banter back and forth. She was definitely like the alpha in charge on that deal. Like, I remember her making like loaded comments to me.
She was flirting with you?
Oh, of course, yeah. This was all a big act. She was like very good at what she did. He was under a spell, basically.
There was attraction there, a very, very strong friendship, and that's why we decided to get married. That night, she said, "I've got something to tell you." She told me a couple of years ago she'd won the lottery. It wasn't the jackpot, but it was £300,000.
Why did she tell you about it on your wedding night?
Who knows? Who knows? Was she hatching her plan? Was she putting these seeds in my head?
When I sit down and think about it, it's really clear that Dina had an agenda from the very beginning out to scam him, steal his money. It's unbelievable, really. Unbelievable.
Did you have any inkling of all this when you met her?
Who could have? That she was a thief, a fraudster and a murderer. I did find a few things strange. After Dina moved in, then the fishing and crewing for me stopped. He told me that he had put her on the land registry documents, so she was a joint owner of the cottage. I was surprised at that.
Probably about 6 months after we got married, I rung home and she said, "I have cancer." Well, of course you're worried. And I was worried. Cancer's that horrible word. I took her to hospital and I collected her. She said, "Let's move out to Florida and let me live my last few years living a really good dream, and I'll set you up in business with the lottery money."
Dina said, "Richard's leaving for the States and he won't be coming back."
Why did Dina tell you? Why didn't Richard just tell you?
Don't know. That was a bit strange. I think probably because she was in control by that time. I think I probably felt, oh well, that's the end of a friendship.
Although Richard didn't want to press charges, his injuries were so severe we were able to get a warrant for Dina's arrest. She was in Devon, living at her parents'. I rang the local police station and said, "We need her arrested as quickly as you can." Then she was brought back to Sussex to be interviewed.
I first met Dina when she had been arrested for the attempted murder of Richard Thompson. I gave her a look to say, "I know what you've done and I'm going to put you away." And then something really strange happened. I remember it vividly. She gave me the look. I got the Dina look. She has this really alluring look that entices men in. It didn't work with me, but it wasn't lost on me that she did it to me in the most bizarre of circumstances while she was under arrest for attempted murder. I think that demonstrates to me just how dangerous she is.
At that point, the pressure was on to get the evidence together to keep her in custody. But we're way behind. We'd lost 2 to 3 days because Richard had waited so long to report the incident.
Because he still loved her. And as he said to me, I've been in love with this woman for nearly a year. She's my wife. She may have done wrong, but I believe in my wedding vows. I said to him, if you don't help us, Richard, I'm going to carry on with this anyway. Luckily, Richard did come to his senses, and we went for the prosecution.
You're piecing it all together in your mind. I'm concussed, basically. Eventually, the reality does set in, and you realise how horrific this was and how worse it could have been. Suppose she stabbed me through the throat. Suppose she'd hit me in the jugular, because it's only a few inches away. The detectives were great. They came, they said, we believe you. And there was a lot to explain. The day after the attack, at 8:30, knock at the door. There's a guy in a suit with a clipboard. He said, oh, your wife's selling the house. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Florida.
Richard had signed over his last will and testament to Dina. He'd signed over a power of attorney to her. Richard said he was going to sell his house and take everything. He went to his bank accounts. All the money was gone.
The £30,000 of my pension payment, £12,000 on the American Express, the £5,000 cheque. She knew exactly what she was going to do. And she explained how I wasn't going to be there. There's your premeditation. Had she achieved killing me, how she was going to dispose of me, who knows?
Dina's remanded in custody, but we have a ticking clock. The trial is coming. And sure enough, she went for the self-defence argument. She said that Richard had tried to kill her. But Dina was examined for injuries and had no injuries. The problem in a case like this, particularly with partners, is it is one word against another. We needed more than that.
As the forensics team went over the crime scene, they discovered that the attempt to clean up wasn't perfect. Fortunately, when you look at it more closely, behind the radiator, quite high up on the walls, Richard's blood spatterings were found all around the room. It was a relief that not all of the evidence had been lost. And then we have another major breakthrough. Dina had an address book. It was full of names of men with their addresses, telephone numbers and business cards. And we were tasked to go through it and call all these numbers. And one of the numbers, this chap answers, and he is horrified. He says, I'm married, I will lose my wife, I'll probably lose my job, please don't call me again. Some of the people flatly denied that anything ever happened, and I don't believe them. We did establish more than 10 more victims. These guys, they meet her, she's too good to be true, telling people that she'd won lotteries and how rich she was and how ill she was, none of which was true. And they had been subjected to her maxing up in their credit cards and then dumping them.
30 years ago, it was a very unusual modus operandi for a woman to target men. There's this male desire to keep things private, which is why Dina got away with so much. We established patterns of behaviour with these men. There may have been different lies, there may have been different backgrounds to the men and to the stories, but there was always the American dream. The American dream was all about moving to a beautiful place and live happily ever after.
Dina was promising Lee that he would be going to America with her, and Julian was going to do fishing trips and work for the Tampa Tribune. Richard thought he was going off to do this job in Florida once his green card had come. And this is a theme that runs through all her other victims as well. But why she was so obsessed with Florida, I don't think I've ever really established.
What was also very clear was that there was a lot of sex, and the sex was very adventurous. It became apparent it was part of the coercive game.
She would phone me randomly, say she's into, oh gosh, like she's into bondage and whips, and I'm laughing because maybe it's just like knowing that I'm a bit blinking strange and prudish. I can't say that if you walked into a room and you saw her that you'd go, oh, well, she's very attractive. I still feel very much that her attraction would be her attitude maybe to sex.
One thing we never saw with Dina is any form of sympathy or empathy. We never found a natural, healthy relationship with a man or a woman in her life. And that, I think, speaks volumes about the psychology of her mind. The mother wouldn't speak to us at all, and the father was very anti-police, which I found staggering because the father was a prison officer. And this suggested a warped mentality, which I think rubbed off on her.
She never really talked about her childhood, but she spoke about gymnastics and going abroad with her father. She never mentioned her mother at all. It was always Dad this or Dad did that. Just seemed like if anything was going wrong, he would be the person that would sort it out. But like when she talked about the gymnastics and things like that, something just doesn't seem right.
As more and more evidence came to light, you figure it out. When the police did a very thorough search of the cottage, they found a tin. It was full of photographs of this other guy, Julian Webb. No idea, never heard of this person. The police explained that Julian had met his end in what they regarded as suspicious circumstances. Who I now know was her second husband, Julian Webb. But I didn't have any knowledge of Julian Webb until this moment.
In some respects, your memories of people still live. I think it's counterproductive to get sort of mawkish and morbid. It really is. It doesn't help anybody.
Had you got to the point where you thought perhaps you weren't going to get justice for Julian?
I don't know if I thought so negatively as that, but it's what kept me going. I think it was Martin Underhill called me and told me she was about to appear in court for the attempted murder of Richard Thompson. I could have fallen off my chair. Having seemingly got away with murder once, here she was having another go.
All rise. This court is now in session. Dina Thompson, you are charged that you unlawfully took out a credit card in Richard Thompson's name, therefore committing fraud. Do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
You are charged that you did unlawfully attack Mr. Thompson with a baseball bat and that you stabbed him with a knife, therefore committing attempted murder. Do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Dina looked very, very small in the witness box. And she admitted that she had lied to Richard about her health, and it was solely so that she would get some sympathy from him.
I was very apprehensive about the court case. When Dina was on the stand, she said that I was in the bathroom trimming curtains with a carving knife, and then said that when she confessed that all my money had gone, that's when I attacked her.
She said that he'd come at her with a knife, and she had managed to grab the baseball bat, hit him twice with it to defend herself, and then got the knife off of him and stabbed him because she thought her life was in danger. She was asked, "Did you love Richard Thompson?" She just said no. Richard was broken by that. This was a dagger through his heart, really.
Hearing someone say that, you realised I was the means to an end. I think I was in the dock for at least 2 days. They were trying to convince the jury I was the aggressor. I was totally frustrated with the ridiculous questions I was asked.
In court, he would sit there, and if he didn't like what he was hearing, he would slap his hands down. Ah! I said to him, "The jury are watching your every move, Richard."
Her mother and father gave evidence on her behalf. I don't think either of them think that Dina could do anything wrong, which seems astonishing to me, really.
Of course, Julian couldn't be mentioned to the jury, but I was confident in the evidence. We had all of the motives that we knew about, the coerciveness towards Richard. It was a slam dunk for me.
They came back in and asked to hear the original call from Richard Thompson to the police.
Richard Thompson phoned up to say, "My wife tried to kill me. I just want it logged in case I seek a divorce." So that's what seemed to create a question of doubt for the jury.
The Black Widow, as she's become known, stood trial for the attempted murder of Richard Thompson.
Mrs. Thompson had denied that she tried to kill her husband.
After stabbing and beating him with a baseball bat, she was acquitted of attempted murder.
The jury accepted that she had acted in self-defense.
When I heard the verdict, I was absolutely devastated. I had been through hell. And I thought, how on earth did the jury not see what was happening?
I thought we had got Dina and that she was going to prison for a substantial amount of time. I was wrong.
We had to shrug it off and carry on fighting. And that's why on the same day as the acquittal, I announced we were reopening the Julian Webb case.
The events portrayed in this trial and the unusual nature of Julian Webb's death means that Sussex Police will re-examine the circumstances of that death.
I was determined to stop Dina and get justice for Rosemary Webb. We now knew that Dina was obsessed with insulin. We'd heard from 5 other men that they'd been injected with insulin. If you inject someone with insulin, you will cause shaking, you'll be disoriented, your temperature will rise, and if it's enough insulin, you will die. And the theory I came up with is that Dina had used insulin on Julian to incapacitate him, And over several days, she made him ingest aspirin and thiopin. And suddenly I had a line from A to B of how a young man went from being fit and healthy to a dead body a week later. But we had a problem. If you have a suspicious death, you have a forensic post-mortem. And Sean said to me, we didn't do that. It was classified as an unexpected death, not a suspicious death, even though many, many people had their own doubts. If you are trying to find long-term drugs in someone's body, it would be in their hair. I realised that I would have to exhume the body. There are only 4 or 5 forensic exhumations in this country a year. I reached out to the world's expert on exhumation at that time. His first question to me completely threw me. And he said, Martin, is there a tree next to the body? Because the tree roots suck all the water out and save the body decomposing. So of course, straight away, we drove to Hayling Island. We found Julian's plot, and it was right next to an oak tree.
I'm very much a person who believes you go back to the earth, that you never really go away. Your chemicals, your spirit is there in the natural world. It's not nothing, it's something else. It's things like that that makes me wish I was religious, because I would then imagine we would meet again in some form, and that's hard to deal with.
It was a really daunting experience. Each 6 inches you go down, you have to take soil samples because bodies do leak fluid and they do leak poison. After about 2 hours, we got to the coffin. That was heavy duty. We were lucky. 96, 97% of his body was intact. Very little of it had decomposed. But if we didn't get anything back from the post-mortem, in the case, it would be closed. The forensic post-mortem showed that small amounts of the thiopin had been fed to Julian over several days. It was enough to question whether Dina had killed Julian Webb. I remember punching the air. I was absolutely over the moon. But the thiopin tastes very bitter. How did Dina get Julian to take the thiopin without knowing? To prove she did it, I needed the answer to that question. But the results from the scientists came in the late summer of 2000. On the 1st of July 2000, Sussex Police started investigating the biggest murder inquiry it had ever launched, which was the Sarah Payne case. We had to catch and lock up the person who'd abducted and killed this little girl. And so we're going to have to park this. But it was really frustrating. I just started getting into the swing with this case, but I knew I would go back to it. Rosemary kept everything in relation to her son's death. Everything.
Let's have a look.
And that's when I first heard about Don Hutson.
Dear Don, how's things? Are you enjoying your beer? And here's another one. Dear Don and Kathy, happy Christmas to you both and hope to see you soon, Julian and Dina.
Some of the letters were sent after Julian's death, where Don had written condolences to Dina. And so I was determined to find Don because I wanted to know his version of what he thought happened to Julian and how Julian died. And the first thing I did was contact the local police in Tampa and ask for their help.
I got a message that I needed to speak to some British detectives, English bobbies. They got an accent, you know. Hello, JD. Could you be of some service, possibly? Yes, sir. Yeah, I can help you out, brother. What you got? We need to find Don Hutson. We would run, you know, just a standard driver's license checks and just see if there's anything available on that person. But there was just nothing that we could, you know, locate them at. And I believe that ultimately led to Martin and Sean coming here.
As soon as we landed...
I think we were probably curiosities.
Yeah, we were. They loved the accent.
They wanted us to know if we brought our hats with us and all that sort of thing, of course.
Did you?
No. There were lots of reasons why we went to America. One was to trace Don Hutson, but also it strengthened the plank of the American dream. We only had 4 days. So we immersed ourselves in the fishing community of Southeast Florida. We went everywhere. Marinas, yacht yards, pubs, restaurants. We spent 3 days looking for him and our time was running out. We were flying home in 2 days. We really wanted to find Don Hutson because I knew he was a personal friend of Julian's and we had a really strong clue that he had spoken to Dina after the death. So I decided to use the media. Hi, this appeal is for Don Hutson, who's an American living in Florida. I am Detective Inspector Underhill and this is Detective Constable Sean MacDonald. And we're both from the Sussex Police in England. I didn't want the American press exaggerating or running off with the wrong idea, and of course they did. Within 24 hours, we were Scotland Yard detectives and Don was a suspect in the murder.
Within a day, Don Hutson contacted me. The dude was pissed that his name was associated with a police investigation.
He was incredibly angry. Yeah, how dare you come over to this country and tell everyone that I'm a murder suspect, you've ruined my life. I got him to agree for me to go and see him at this huge outdoor hunting lodge. There was lots of taxidermy animals there. You know, 6-foot-tall bear. There was an alligator. The whole thing was gun-centric, man-centric. When I met him there, he was incredibly hostile. He gave me both barrels. Said, look, this has just completely been exaggerated beyond all belief. Slowly we brought him down, and then he started talking. He told us the story that Don and Julian had met through fishing. They corresponded together, they spoke on the phone. He said the last time he spoke to Dina was a couple of days after Julian had died. Dina called Don and said, "Sorry, Julian's dead." She said, "He had a really hot curry. Next morning, I found him dead in bed. It looks like he killed himself." And I went, whoa, 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 whoa. What was that you just said? That was the moment for me. That was my Pandora's box. Can you conceal the taste of dithiopin in a curry? Yes, of course you can. Suddenly, to me, everything clicked into place. That was how she gave me the tablets. It was that eureka moment for me. I was a man possessed from then on. I thought, I've got you now.
Dina Holmes arrived at Crawley Police Station in West Sussex just before 10 o'clock this morning. Shortly afterwards, detectives began questioning her about the death of her former husband 8 years ago.
Dina was arrested, but wouldn't speak to us. She chose to provide a prepared statement.
There was only 2 people in the house on that night, you and Julian. Of course, sadly, Julian can't help. But you were there, Dina. Then tell me what happened.
I've given you a statement, I'm not giving you any more.
In this case, it was undeniable that she was a liar. That in itself doesn't get you very far in proving a case of murder. We had put together a lot of strands of evidence about Dina's extraordinary, I would say, deformed personality, about her dishonesty, her motives, and about her very curious conduct in the period up to Julian's death and immediately after. Days before Julian died, Lee unexpectedly turned up at Dina's house. Had Julian and Lee met, then the bigamy would have come out. I mean, if Lee had started to tell Julian what had happened to him, well, imagine what the effect would have been on Julian and on Dina's marriage to him. And so maybe she decided relatively quickly to kill him. And that time frame, Lee turns up, it's only a week later that Julian dies. Is it just a coincidence?
She didn't want to get caught. Suddenly, I had not just the method in which she'd given Julian Webb a fatal dose of dithiopin, I also had a motive, and I thought that the pieces are coming together. One of my analysts had created an A3 chart, and I called it a story on a page. And we had each victim's name and the story that they were told. I said, when the jury go into the jury room, having listened to a very bizarre story, I want them to refer to a piece of paper, and it's all there. A repetitive serial fraudster who used violence when it was necessary.
It was back to the thrill of the chase again.
You were excited?
Well, I suppose, anticipation, but I think mostly thankfulness that something had been recognised at last. I think that was the overwhelming feeling. Couldn't contemplate that the perpetrator would get away with it.
Dina Thompson was described in court as a very disturbed person.
Police say she was motivated by money and hatred of men.
Thompson denies murder and the trial continues.
Here I was presenting the jury and, in effect, the public with this very intimate analysis of what we thought was going on in this woman's mind and her very remarkable and distorted personality. But I never heard her speak.
Dina didn't testify in court, and I think there's one reason for that. Because the lawyer has said, if you go near that stand, your story will collapse.
A woman's been jailed for life for murdering her second husband by poisoning his curry on his 31st birthday.
Curry. Poison in curry.
Sentencing Dina Thompson to life imprisonment, the judge, Michael Hyam, told her nothing could excuse you for the wickedness of what you did.
Dina Thompson is tonight beginning a life sentence for murder.
She is dishonest, untruthful, manipulative, deceitful and scheming. We got there. It was one of these sort of highs, you know, adrenaline flow. You know, you could have gone out and danced all night sort of thing.
It's still really hard to believe that I know that person. You know, if someone goes, what does a murderer look like? Well, not Dina.
I remember there would be moments where if you thought something, she'll be reminiscing the same thought. And that's where I thought we were going, as one. It makes me sick now, actually, when I think about it. Because to me, that was a wasted life with her. She's paid for her crimes, but she hasn't paid for her crime against me.
She still goes by the name Dina Thompson. She still uses your surname.
Yeah, I find that odd.
Do you think she ever loved you?
No. I have accepted it. A hard acceptance. But I had no choice. I had to accept this and move on.
It would be much easier to entrap men now than it was in her day. Now you just swipe left or right on an app. You can spot vulnerabilities in people just on their profiles online.
What better age for somebody like Dina to then start targeting my age group? So has the story finished after 30 years? We'll wait and see what the next chapter says.
Would she do it again?
Yes, I'm sure she would. I don't think she can help herself. I hope I'm wrong.
If you have been affected by any of the issues raised in this programme, help is available online at sky.com/viewer support.
A deadly web of secrets and lies ensnares an unlikely group of people.
It was a good marriage. We thought it was perfect.
Double lives and hidden truths end up buried in a shallow grave.
You didn't know this, but she had a boyfriend.
Nobody expects something like that.
Who can you trust? Who should you fear?
She was a manipulator. She was a liar.
He was extremely jealous.
He was installing cameras all over the place.
And when secret lives are revealed...
He wasn't successful, he didn't have money. He was portraying himself to be somebody that he wasn't. It was all fake.
It leads to a vicious and despicable crime.
The body pretty badly decomposed.
To get to the truth, detectives unravel a sinister story of lies and deadly deceptions.
The whole point was to push that first domino to get all the rest of them to fall. That's exactly what happened.
The twisted truth revealed.
Every fault he had was exposed.
It's just a web of lies.
There is no justice. There is no closure. There is no ending to this.
A secret to die for. Halfway between Los Angeles and San Diego, the city of Murrieta, California.
It's a nice, quiet community, very professional, and a nice place to live.
And that's really based on the low crime rate, the quality of living.
Local residents Melissa and Henry Stange appear to have a life most people would envy. They've been married for nearly 2 decades and have 2 children whom they adore.
They were in love and they seemed to get along fine. They met at a horse ranch. It was a good marriage. We thought it was perfect and they were having fun. Melissa worked as a medical billing specialist.
While Melissa is more of a career woman, Henry is a jack of all trades who prefers to work outdoors.
My brother was working in the desert, training falcons to fly and land, and he was always feeling really good when he was working and doing what he loved. My son was like a square peg in a round hole.
He was a guitar player, he was a musician, very eccentric type of guy.
When Henry's not working, hiking or riding motorcycles, he keeps himself busy in his man cave.
Henry hung out in the garage of his home a lot. He had all of his music equipment in the garage, his guitars, amplifiers, his speakers.
And he's got his ham radio to keep him company.
He would spend hours working on equipment and things like that, all the while listening to the ham radio.
But then, one night, a hit-and-run accident changes the lives of Henry and Melissa forever.
My brother was visiting a friend in Pomona. He was leaving. He walked outside to get on his motorcycle, and he was putting his helmet on. And somebody drove by, didn't see him, and hit him. Henry was dragged down the street. He was screaming the whole time. It caused serious injury. His leg had fractured bones.
The driver takes off and Henry is rushed to emergency. He survives but will never be the same.
He had both legs broken. He was scraped up really bad. The skin was down to the bone, and he had no insurance.
Henry is unable to work or do any of the things he loves.
Henry was an outdoorsy kind of guy initially, until he had the accident, and then after that he became a whole lot more secluded. Essentially he became a loner.
As time passes in Southern California, things only get worse for Henry. The pain becomes unbearable.
That's when the problems were starting.
Depressed, disabled, unemployed, and in constant pain, Henry's only relief is the medication prescribed to him by his doctors, OxyContin, which has some troubling side effects.
It can prevent people from doing daily activities because they basically need this medication in order to operate. They are unable to have a normal life. They can't get a job. It can be devastating.
It's not long before Henry is dependent on and overusing the powerful opioid.
I think they gave him that OxyContin like it was candy.
Henry keeps his growing addiction to painkillers a secret, but it begins to take a toll on their marriage nonetheless.
It made him tired. It made him erratic.
He would go for weeks without talking to Melissa, and then other times he'd be like, hi, happy. I think she thought he was crazy.
As Henry's prescription dependency overpowers his life, the once happy couple begin fighting on a regular basis. It gets so bad, the police are called in.
Henry and his wife did have disturbances. If I had to guess, I would say we responded to their home 6 or 7 times regarding those problems.
Melissa confides in her mother, Valerie, about the problems they're having, and Valerie reveals a secret of her own.
She didn't like him.
She wasn't happy about the marriage in the first place.
She had nothing positive to say, but rather believes that he's just not a good husband.
Months pass, and Henry can no longer hide the severity of his drug addiction.
I think everything just kind of blew up. Melissa decided to pack up and take the kids and move in with her mother.
And that's when things really get messy.
It was a very rocky divorce.
Until the divorce is finalised and custody of the children is settled, Henry continues to live in the family home, but he's not working, so Melissa pays the bills.
I believe Melissa paid the mortgage and was ordered to pay the utilities.
Meanwhile, Henry is flat out broke.
He probably got some kind of checks or money from an assistance program.
He was not able to support himself very well. He couldn't. And how he got extra money was selling things. He would buy things and sell things. Electronic equipment, welding equipment, stuff like that.
That's not all he's selling. The abundance of pills prescribed for his painful condition are a valuable and desired commodity.
Henry was selling Oxy on Craigslist.
He put an ad on Craigslist to sell his prescription drugs in order to get some sort of income.
And at that time, one pill could be anywhere from $5 to $20.
But this isn't the life Henry wanted. He's utterly alone, dependent on pills, and broke. He sinks into a depression.
I think he wasn't operating on 4 cylinders, if you get me. He kind of like fell apart once his marriage was falling apart.
But thankfully, Henry finds a lifeline to a new world of possibilities and a new way to connect with others. Ham radio.
Henry didn't have a lot of friends, people that he hung out with in person. He was by himself. So I think the ham radio for Henry was an outlet.
Hey, guys, what's going on out there?
Henry finds a new life on the airwaves.
I think that's Henry's only lifeline at this point.
We knew he was in deep with the ham radio, but we just thought it was a fun hobby for him.
But it becomes more than just a hobby.
Hey folks, I'm back. It's Henry. I just got out of the hot tub with some of my fabulous friends. Who out there has a hot tub?
Henry makes the most that he can of his new life. He creates an entirely new and fictitious identity for himself.
He had a ham radio channel that he specifically was on. He even told us he had this show and it was called The Henry Show.
He lives at home on his own. He's totally secluded. But once he gets on that ham radio, he's a superstar. He can be whoever he wants to be. He can embellish whatever story he wants to embellish.
Henry doesn't have to be a broke, divorced, unemployed man with a bad leg who's living in his ex-wife's home. Over the airwaves, he's a successful, wealthy businessman with powerful friends who hangs out with celebrities.
That's how they did it there. Everybody had to have the best, most exciting life.
But Henry's new broadcast personality is outspoken and often crude, offending many people.
Take some responsibility for your own lives, okay?
He was very eccentric. He would kind of ramble on about strange things on the radio. He kind of felt, I think, in his own mind that maybe he was some kind of like radio personality.
and Henry won't give anyone else a chance to speak.
He's infuriating a bunch of other people because once you key that mic, guess what? They don't get the ability to transmit. He's taking up all their airtime for everybody else that wanted to get on and communicate.
Not only does he clog up the airwaves, some of the things he says are extremely divisive.
The people who were on his side pushed him along to be even more obnoxious, and the people who didn't like him would talk about the politics or any beliefs or his conspiracy theories, any of that. They just fed off each other. The people who liked my brother loved to hear what he was going to say and how things were going to be and how obnoxious it would get. And the people who hated him, they were on the ham radio to get their voice in there too. So it was even more obnoxious.
Exactly, that's what it was. Vulgar.
You're not making any fucking sense.
The whole ham radio was vulgar.
Pretty soon, Henry is the starfighter in a clash of airwave egos.
Henry made a lot of these ham radio operators angry.
And the hatred for Henry isn't confined to the airwaves. Grievances against Henry hit the internet, and the comments are nasty.
Henry, make society better. Stick the gun in your mouth and pull the trigger. Someone please post a picture of Henry Stange so I can fantasize of smashing his head into the ground.
The horrible things they said about him should not have been allowed. It just turned into a toilet.
Leading the charge against Henry are two eccentric brothers who are offended by what he says and does over the airwaves, and they let him know.
The Martin brothers were kind of the leaders of this movement to stop Henry from messing up the airwaves. They were somewhat transient. They had an RV. They kind of traveled around Southern California, anywhere from LA County all the way out to the desert. They take this ham radio group really serious. Like, it's their way of life. They are literally on this thing 24/7. The Martin brothers posted a lot of the threatening messages to Henry. They talked about finding Henry, coming to his house.
Their disdain for Henry is so great they dig into his personal life and discover it's all a lie.
The Martin brothers did some research on him and found out that he wasn't employed, that he wasn't successful, that he didn't have money, that he didn't have all these things that he said he had. So he was portraying himself to be somebody that he wasn't, and they were calling him out on it.
In a crushing and embarrassing blow to Henry, the Martin brothers expose his secrets to the world.
They made fun of his lifestyle, they made fun of his disability, they made fun of his living situation. They had a genuine dislike for him.
Now they were saying he was a deadbeat and blah, 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 blah. Every fault he had was exposed.
They even take it further and make it more personal and more dangerous.
They would take pictures of his home, his address, his date of birth, pictures of his car and license plate. Whatever personal information was out there, they could find it.
Ripping apart his illustrious illusion and any privacy, they post all of this information on the forum and announce it on the airwaves.
It made him vulnerable.
Henry is no longer an anonymous voice on the air. He's now a target.
He really started to get concerned. He was worried some idiots were going to threaten his life.
He couldn't take it.
Henry Stange has dangerous new enemies who've exposed his lies and deepest secrets to his entire world.
Some people were mad at him. The two brothers hated him.
It was incredibly cruel.
Henry's family is targeted with threats as well.
I started getting phone calls. They wouldn't say who they were. They would threaten me, and they would also threaten Henry.
As the attacks get more personal, Henry wonders how they're getting such intimate details of his life.
He would hear personal information on the ham radio, information on the divorce.
But who would know his most intimate details besides a family member?
He had to come to the realization that some of the information that was being told on the ham radio by the brothers could only come from Melissa's family. I think they had connections with people on the ham radio.
And Melissa's mother is just as angry as she is. Henry and Melissa's divorce is dragging on much longer than anyone thought it would. It's causing a lot of extra stress and financial burden for her daughter.
It was not an amicable divorce by any stretch of the imagination.
It was court-ordered that everything was supposed to remain the same, as far as bills, mortgage payment, just like it was always. But she wasn't paying the bills.
So his lights would get turned off.
Making things as difficult as they could with Henry's life now. When the divorce got ugly, it got ugly.
They ultimately even got restraining orders against each other because they couldn't see eye to eye.
Henry feels like his enemies are ganging up on him, and he descends into despair.
You have no idea who you are messing with.
He was spiraling and he was trying to get a grip on things.
But in the midst of all this anger and darkness, Henry finds a spark of light.
That's when he met Ashley.
It's an exciting new relationship with a pretty young woman.
Henry was a man in his early 50s, and Ashley was a girl in her early 20s. He was really thrilled to have a girlfriend.
He told me he met her at a music store. Everything he liked, she liked.
She liked to do all the kind of fun kind of things he loved. And he couldn't believe it. She was younger, she was really cute, and he told me that she was everything he wanted in a woman.
Henry even introduces his new girlfriend to his children, much to his ex-wife's chagrin.
I remember one specific time they had met at a park, and Melissa had brought the kids to the park, and my brother had Ashley with him. A little jab, I guess.
Ashley's presence doesn't help the escalating tension between Henry and Melissa. In fact, it's about to boil over.
It was Mother's Day weekend, and Melissa had come by the house. I don't know if it was because Henry needed clothes for the kids or she was picking up the kids.
She broke the door open. I think between the two of them, she was a violent one.
They were yelling back and forth at each other, and I think my brother said, "You can't be on the property. We have a restraining order." He called the police. While he was on the phone calling 911, she ripped the phone out of the wall and threw it on the floor.
And in California, that's against the law.
When you take a phone out of the wall or interrupt a call to the police, it's an offense.
It ends badly for Melissa, who's arrested and spends Mother's Day in jail. As the troubles between Melissa and Henry intensify, Henry's relationship with Ashley deepens, and he shares his newfound love over the airwaves.
He wanted everybody to know that he had this beautiful young girlfriend and that they were together.
And Henry goes to extreme lengths to prove it.
He even went so far as to have sex on air.
He would key the mic, and listeners would be able to hear this moaning over the airwaves.
What people don't know is that Henry is just spinning another big deception.
Despite what Henry was telling everybody about how they met, he wasn't being honest, because Henry actually met Ashley through a Craigslist ad.
It turns out Ashley is also addicted to painkillers and was one of Henry's buyers.
Ashley was actually one of the customers that bought the prescription medication from Henry. From my understanding, Ashley may have also been involved in some sort of accident years earlier, but Ashley had a severe addiction to Oxy and prescription painkillers.
When her prescription was cut off, she turned to other sources.
There were code words, and anybody could go onto one of these websites and they kind of knew what they were looking for, and they could contact someone.
And that's how she found Henry. But Ashley is leading her own life of deceit. For her, it's not about love, it's about a free supply of Oxy.
Ashley didn't pay cash for the pills, she paid Henry with sex, with the sexual relationship.
I think she was a full-blown addict. I don't think he knew that.
I don't think she loved him at all. I think it was a one-way relationship in her mind that as long as she kept up her end of the bargain, she gets drugs at the end of it. She's only in it for the drugs.
But Ashley has other, more dangerous secrets.
Ashley was a manipulator. Ashley was a liar.
I think it's just a web of lies.
The secrets and deceptions are growing more complicated and intertwined in the life of Henry Stange, and he has no idea how dangerous things are about to get.
Henry didn't know this, but Ashley was in a serious relationship.
Ashley's longtime boyfriend, Curtis Kruger, is everything Henry is not.
Curtis was a bigger guy, 6 foot to 6'2". He was very muscular, athletic.
Curtis is a lieutenant in the US Marines stationed at 29 Palms, a military base in the Southern California desert.
My brother never knew about Kruger. I think Ashley made it her mission to keep that part of her life private.
Curtis was really deeply in love with Ashley. He took their relationship very, very seriously.
But what Curtis doesn't know is that Ashley is leading a dangerous double life.
Part of Curtis's job required him to go out in the field for training. This left Ashley at home alone, and she wouldn't necessarily just stay at home waiting. This gave her the ability to be more secretive, to get deeper into her addiction.
But Curtis does notice signs that something is wrong.
He suspects that she's not in the straight and narrow.
Curtis has a gut feeling that she's hiding something, but he has no idea her secrets involve another man.
I don't think he had any idea that she was selling her body for drugs to Henry.
Then one night, Ashley makes a grave mistake when her car breaks down on an isolated road.
She calls Kruger to come pick her up, and it's at that point that Curtis said, hey, enable your location on your phone so that I'm able to come help you.
Curtis comes to the rescue, but Ashley forgets to disable the tracker on her phone.
That ultimately is the catalyst for Curtis to continue to surveil her and watch her every move and to find out where she's at.
Curtis is now able to secretly track Ashley at all times.
Curtis doing his own investigative work.
At one point he looks to see where she's at, and she's in Marietta. She's at a gas station around the corner from where Henry lives, and he actually drives to Marietta and then confronts her. What are you doing down here? What's the deal? She's put on the spot, and she ultimately confesses.
Ashley tells Curtis about her addiction and her relationship with Henry.
She was using Henry so she could get her drugs and so she could get high. Curtis was upset over Ashley's addiction. He was so in love with her that the thought of somebody helping her with this terrible addiction, I think he made him angry.
Ashley promises to change her ways, to hold on to Curtis.
She agreed to go to counselling and some sort of rehab to get her over the hill and get her off of the drugs.
Because Curtis was so deeply into her and he really wanted to fix her, and she knew that. She agreed that she would stop doing this. She wasn't going to see Henry anymore, but it was all a lie.
Ashley has no intention of giving up drugs or Henry.
She was a pathological liar, or maybe she lied because she made excuses to get her drugs, her lifestyle. But she lied repeatedly.
But Curtis is in love, and thanks to Ashley's lies, he's now on the list of people who hate Henry with a passion. And the secrets are about to take a violent and deadly turn.
Nobody expects something like that. It was horrible.
Ashley promises her boyfriend Curtis that she'll stop seeing Henry. But she's leading a double life.
Even though the relationship had been discovered, Ashley didn't stop. She kept doing what she was doing. She would still go out of her way to hide things and keep things secret.
Meanwhile, Henry is blissfully ignorant of Ashley's other life with Curtis.
My brother loved Ashley.
I think she used Henry and she made him feel like she was in love with him, even though she wasn't. It was all fake.
But then things take a nasty turn. And Ashley discovers a horrifying secret.
Ashley didn't hear anything from him for 2 or 3 days. So she went over there to see if he was alive. And he was alive, but still just becoming conscious.
Someone had broken into Henry's house while he was sleeping on the couch. He just woke up to someone attacking him. He was being bludgeoned.
Someone hit him in the head with the hammer.
Henry didn't see who attacked him, but he's grateful Ashley arrived in time to save him.
I had said, you have to go to the hospital. Why would you wait so long? He said, don't worry. Ashley's here. She's taking care of me. She bought special Band-Aids, and she's going to get me back to health.
Although he doesn't remember much, Henry does remember one thing about the attack.
He saw someone running out the door. He could swear he saw a woman running.
This gives Henry a pretty good idea of who is responsible.
He thought that potentially it could have been his ex-wife that wanted to harm him.
When the attack happened, the divorce was getting very ugly.
And Henry believes Melissa's family knows some people who hate him as much as they do.
He was concerned with the tie-in to the two brothers because he knew they were really scary people.
I had said, please call the police, let's get a report.
But following Ashley's advice, Henry decides to wait and see if anyone talks about the attack over the ham radio airwaves.
Eventually somebody would say something. And the first moment that somebody on the ham radio said something or brought up the attack, they'd know immediately who was involved because nobody knew, except the two of them, Ashley and Henry.
As soon as he's able, Henry makes security precautions.
He was concerned because he told me he was installing cameras all over the place. So he had a camera outside, he had cameras in the garage.
As Henry lives in growing fear and paranoia, Curtis and Ashley's relationship intensifies. In fact, Curtis decides to take the relationship to the next level and proposes.
They talked about getting married. They talked about having kids. They talked about, moving to the East Coast.
This delicate web of lies binds Henry, Ashley, and Curtis together. But a week later, 100 miles away, a grisly discovery changes everything. A hiker is exploring the California desert when he spots something unusual.
Our avid outdoorsman sees vultures pulling at a carcass in the desert. So this gentleman took several photographs of that and thought nothing of it. Later on that night, showed the pictures to his wife.
Look at this. What does this look like?
That doesn't look like a carcass. That looks like human remains.
It's a gruesome discovery. Authorities are immediately called to the scene.
The grave discovered in the desert was really shallow, maybe 12 to 15 inches deep at the deepest point, but it was just enough to lay a human body into it and then maybe slightly cover it up.
It definitely appeared as though it was a rush job. They didn't take the adequate time in order to bury it deep enough to cover your tracks. And that's ultimately what led to the discovery. The body was pretty badly decomposed. The temperature and the elements out there was really hot. The torso was partially buried, partially exposed due to the animal activity having unearthed it, so it was in pretty bad shape.
But one thing is clear, this death is no accident.
The body has some sharp force injuries in the neck and torso, chest area, and also there are multiple fractures on the skull.
At this point, we just knew that it was a homicide.
It's almost impossible to identify the body. Fortunately, investigators catch a break.
They were able to rehydrate part of the hand and get a fingerprint from that hand.
The identification was made, and it was Henry Stange.
Henry has been murdered and dumped in a shallow grave. Detectives notify Henry's family.
When I got on the phone with the detective, he was very brief and straight to the point. He said, "Do you know a Henry Allen Stange?" And I said, "Yes, that's my brother." And he said, "Your brother's been a victim of a violent homicide." And I couldn't even speak.
My daughter called me and let me know that Henry had been killed.
And now the investigation begins.
At this point, we don't know where the homicide took place.
Police search Henry's residence for clues.
They go through the house, they're searching room to room. Ultimately, they go into the garage.
The second they step foot in the garage, they know something is wrong.
The blood in the garage was still visible. It had coagulated. There were large pools of blood. There was blood spatter on all the walls. It was all over the place.
It looked like a pretty vicious crime scene.
But there are no clues to point them to the killer.
There was no physical evidence at the crime scene. There was blood. There was no DNA. There was no fingerprints.
Not only that, all of the cameras and the hard drives Henry installed for his safety had been removed.
They had been taken. So whoever these people were, they did a good job of hiding what they did.
With the likely murder location now known, the Murrieta police investigation hits full speed.
Based on electricity bill, there was no more energy consumption after the 23rd, 24th of May. So that was somewhat of the time frame that we believe that Henry was murdered.
Now detectives need to find out who's responsible for this heinous crime.
Initially, what we do in those circumstances, we do a deep dive into Henry Stange.
Detectives look into Henry's background and find their first person of interest, his embittered ex-wife, Melissa.
They were having a vicious divorce and there had been a lot of friction.
Not only was it violent, it was getting expensive.
The house that Henry lived in, the ex-wife still paid the mortgage on it because he did not provide any income. That might have been a reason why she might have wanted Henry gone.
And Melissa's behaviour captures their attention.
My brother wasn't even cremated yet, and they were selling every single thing of his of value. Why are you doing this? Why are you selling everything?
Because of the history with Henry and his ex-wife, we had cause to look into her as a suspect.
Hearing that news upon his murder, she seemed genuinely upset. She showed all the appropriate responses that one would, that if they were genuinely shocked at the fact that he was murdered.
She didn't really give any reason to second guess what she was saying.
Police rule Melissa out as a suspect, but their attention quickly turns to another family member who had allegedly been making threats against Henry.
There was actually messages on Melissa's mother's page. I just didn't know what to believe, if they were going to talk that viciously about Henry.
Melissa's mother, Valerie, becomes a person of interest.
It was ugly enough that none of this was making sense anymore.
His mother-in-law was making him lose face, saying the house wasn't even in his name, and he had his wife put in jail, making him look bad.
She had a dislike for Henry based on the fact that he was mistreating her daughter. She was asked outright, well, if you didn't do it, could you have asked somebody else to do it? And adamantly, she said no.
Once again, investigators find the answers genuine. Their gut instinct tells them the family has nothing to do with it. Instead, they turn their focus to Henry's hobby and find a new lead.
Turn off the fucking radio and go fucking do your shit. You know, Hank, unless you're grabbing razor blade and you're slitting your wrist, then no one cares what you're doing.
They discover it wasn't only his ex-wife who hated Henry. He also had some online enemies.
The Martin brothers really had it in for Henry. Based on the communications back and forth between both of them, they would text back and forth and send images. They went so far as to send a milk carton with a picture of Henry decapitated. They really had it in for Henry.
The Martin brothers emerge as the most likely possible suspects. And as police dig deeper into their lives, the evidence stacks up against them. They live near Joshua Tree National Park.
That was very coincidental, being in the area where Henry's body was discovered. They were definitely number one on the radar at that point.
Police try to track down the brothers, but they are nowhere to be found.
These brothers were somewhat of recluses. They lived in an RV. They didn't have a set address. And to be able to find an RV or contact these gentlemen proved really, really difficult.
As they continue the manhunt for the Martin brothers, an important piece of evidence shifts their focus.
We got additional information, which changed the whole course of the investigation.
The focus turns away from the Martin brothers as possible suspects when detectives learn about Henry's girlfriend, Ashley. Not only was she at the crime scene days after his body was discovered, she didn't bother to report Henry missing.
The day that the Riverside County Sheriff's investigators served the search warrant at Henry's home, a neighbor told them that they just saw Henry's girlfriend, Ashley, drive by the house while the investigators were there.
Yet she didn't stop and continued to drive past the location.
Why is she not contacting law enforcement? Why didn't she stop and talk to an investigator? Why would she just drive by and not do anything?
That's a huge red flag for us.
Police have a new suspect, Ashley Stapp, and she is not what she seems.
One of the first things you do is you Google somebody's name, and the first thing that pops up is a photo of Ashley. And in the caption of the photo, it says First Lieutenant Curtis Kruger and his fiancée, Ashley.
We find out that not only is Ashley supposedly Henry's girlfriend, but Ashley has another boyfriend.
As police hunt for a cold-blooded killer, the case is about to take another shocking and unexpected turn.
She lied repeatedly. Without that, this murder wouldn't have happened.
Police are caught up in a whirlwind of lies and deceit. They suspect either Ashley Stapp or Curtis Kruger may be involved in Henry's death, but there is no proof.
Sometimes you have an option to use another investigative technique.
Detectives decide to dive into their cell phone records to trace their movements around the time Henry was murdered and make shocking discoveries.
Kruger was in the vicinity of Henry Stange's house and then drove to Joshua Tree National Park, where ultimately we found Henry's body in a shallow grave. His phone also hit off the cell phone towers in that vicinity at that same time.
Why would someone go to the Joshua Tree National Park if they weren't involved in anything?
Because of her behaviour after the crime, police believe Ashley is in on it, but this is all circumstantial evidence. To get the proof they need, detectives devise an elaborate sting operation. Based on the evidence they've collected, they get a warrant for a wiretap so they can listen in on Ashley and Curtis' phones, and then they set their plan in motion.
Then what we do is what we call stimulate the wire.
So we decided that we were going to contact Ashley's brother and explain to him that we were looking for a man that may be missing that we think his sister may know. We show him a picture of Ashley and Henry together. The whole point was to just push that first domino to get all the rest of them to move and fall. And that's exactly what happened.
Police listen in on every word of what is said next.
Ashley's brother gets on the phone, calls Ashley and said, "Hey, I've just had 2 Marietta police detectives come at the front door and they're asking questions about Henry." It rattles her cage.
As soon as they hang up, immediately Ashley calls Curtis and says, "The police were just at my brother's house asking about Henry."
What happens next gives the detectives what they're looking for.
They start to have that conversation. Do you think the police know?
They were talking about everything they did to cover up the crime. They talked about who could have seen them. They said it must have been the neighbor. The neighbor saw us load the body in the truck.
They're saying it in plain English. We loaded it in the truck and when we buried it in the desert, and that's as good as it gets.
Police arrest both Ashley and Curtis and charge them with murder.
And we finally thought we were going to get some form of justice.
But it's not that simple. Ashley and Curtis insist they're innocent, and despite the overwhelming evidence, it's not enough for a slam dunk.
We didn't actually have any smoking gun. We want to get more. We want to get the icing on the cake.
So prosecutors offer a deal.
In order for the district attorney to build a better and stronger case, they have one or the other turn state's evidence against each other. Curtis was absolutely adamant that he wanted an attorney. He wasn't going to talk.
Ashley, on the other hand, takes the offer.
The district attorney's office had this term called Queen for a Day, where someone could say everything and give all their information about the crime they were involved in, and it couldn't be used against you in court. So she told her story.
And it's a twisted tale. On the night of May the 24th, Ashley goes to see Henry but tells Curtis she's going to visit her mother. Curtis doesn't believe her.
Obviously, Curtis has put two and two together and said, nah, I know where she's at. More than likely, she's at Henry's house. He goes to Henry's house, and Curtis walked into the garage and assaulted Henry. According to Ashley's statement, she said that she was in the bathroom when she heard a commotion out in the garage.
Curtis doesn't just assault Henry, he brutally beats him and then stabs him.
He was stabbed in the chest. His head was caved in. He was beaten.
But he didn't die easy. He fought hard for his life.
Ashley said she stayed in the bathroom until Curtis Kruger walks in and says, I've done something really bad.
Ashley claims only then does she know what happened.
And they decide to clean up the crime scene.
They roll Henry up in a blanket and they put Henry in the back of Curtis's truck. And they leave Henry's home. They dispose of all the physical evidence, the video recordings, the cameras and stuff like that. They drove to Joshua Tree National Park and they randomly picked a spot 50 to 100 feet off this main road where they buried Henry in a shallow grave.
But unfortunately, he wasn't dead.
What makes the crime even more despicable is that Henry survived the vicious assault. He was still alive when they buried him in the desert.
Ashley said that Henry was moaning as they lowered him into the shallow grave.
Henry Stange was buried alive and left to be ripped apart by wild animals.
He wasn't dead. He was alive. What the hell? Think about it.
Ashley also tells detectives that Curtis was responsible for the hammer attack on Henry.
Curtis attacks Henry. He hits Henry in the head with a hammer. He grabs Ashley, pulls her out of the house, and they leave.
The woman who Henry saw leaving after the attack was in fact Ashley.
She came back and she made it feel like she was there to take care of him, but she wasn't. It was all fake.
When confronted with the evidence, Curtis claims self-defense. He says he only went to confront Henry because of the accusation Ashley made.
His defense was that when he confronted Ashley about being down in Murrieta, she said that Henry had raped her.
He claims Henry assaulted him and Curtis had to fight back. Police don't buy it. Curtis Kruger is found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 18 years to life in prison. Because of her Queen for a Day deal, Ashley Stapp gets 329 days in custody for accessory after the fact, plus 3 years probation.
Mercy to the guilty is cruelty to the innocent. No prison time. She stepped over his body while he was gasping for air and wrapped him in his own blanket and threw him in the truck. He was fully alive.
I think lies compounded on other lies just led to the worst possible scenario, which was murder, the killing of a human being, which is the absolute worst.
There is no justice. There is no closure. There is no ending to this. I want people to know that he wasn't your average guy. He was a little different, but he loved people. He loved animals. He loved his kids.
His enthusiasm. He was interested in everything. Very sad.
He always tried to make you laugh, even if it was something ridiculous. He was comforting. He was He was my brother.